Georgia is an NFL team right now. That was a quote that Heather Dinich, who covers college football for the ESPN, not the ESPN, had the first week of the season. Some folks, I think it was a college football coach, saying that, reacting to Georgia's dismantling of Clemson. And it kind of gets back to the point of something Kirby was talking about today on Monday, the week of Georgia's matchup with Kentucky up in the Commonwealth. He was asked a question about guys entering the portal, and he talks about the NFL a lot, actually. And one thing he said here is this quote. He said, "Countless general managers, NFL general managers, have told me that the kids that come out of Georgia are so much better off and developed for having stayed, even over playing, because of what kind of practice they get and who they get to practice against." He said, "It's unfortunate because the feedback we get from the NFL there's nowhere they'd rather have players than here developing," talking about practice at Georgia. And he said that the NFL feels like their best evaluation is when they come to our practice and see our guys go against each other. So this is not a new phenomenon, this discussion from Kirby. And not just Kirby. I mean, if you talk to guys off the record, guys that are older, Kirby's been at Georgia for 9 years now. And there's a plenty of data to back this up when you talk to people off the record. And they're not joking when they say the practices are harder than the games. That's a real thing for them. And I think Kirby talks about it again here. One more thing he said on Monday. He said, "All you have to do is talk to one NFL person. They'll tell you they'd much rather have quality over quantity. They'd much rather judge the plays that you play, and they'd much rather you be training at Georgia than anywhere else." So, Kirby does 3 press conferences a week, once after the game and one on Monday and one on Tuesday. And today's message essentially was to recruits. I mean, the question, he doesn't know what guys are going to ask, of course, but he reiterated this point over and over and over again about how the best place to get ready for the NFL was not the SEC, was not Sanford Stadium. It was the Woodruff practice fields. Very few people, I think most Georgia fans don't know what Georgia's practice fields are called. They are the Woodruff practice fields. And we talked about this before. I'm going to get it up on the screen while I'm rambling here. They have over time changed, but they are the exact place where Kirby's talking about making the biggest change for a high school player in development into an NFL professional over time. It does take time to, of course, get where you've got to go, and the practice fields where that time takes place. All right, got it on the screen again. So this is the Woodruff practice fields. This is actually going to change again in the very near future. But, Georgia uses these fields. They're not even, one of them is not even a 100-yard field. You can't see my mouse, but this upper field, I guess that would be the north field. Kind of northwest field. Anyway, all of this has been constructed in a way that Georgia can maximize the space that it has. They've decided to use this space, but this giant giant gray blot, that is the practice fields. That's a full field in there, and then you've got a full field right here opposite the Coliseum, across the road from the Coliseum, and then you've got this upper field here. I mean, I'm calling it an upper field. It's about an 80-yard field. It's not a full-length field. This is changing too. This track is being moved from the Spectowns track is being moved to off campus and by softball. So Georgia's going to spread out even more, and that's where all of these guys are working every day. Right now, Georgia only has three. Sanford Stadium's not a practice field. They practice at Sanford. It's not a practice field. So they have 2 full practice fields, which is the indoor and the one, I guess, the bottom, to the right. What I always call it to the right. We would walk out from Butts. Mirror, I'll put it on the screen one more time. Back in the day, you'd walk out from Butts and you'd walk down here, and you'd either, to the left is almost always the offense, to the right is everybody else, the defense. But the quarterbacks and receivers were almost always in the upper field. And to the right was where, the safeties, the DBs, the defensive line, and the offensive line would be kind of mixed in here to some degree. And then where the shadow is for the tower is where the offensive line is typically at. But the right-hand field is where you see the offense. I'm getting off the point here, which is Georgia's going to make this even better over time. There's been a lot of money dumped into Georgia's program. You're going to see even more of it as time goes on. That's a whole nother discussion. But I think when you look at what Georgia's got, the layout, it's only now getting the way you'd like to have it, to be honest with you. You'd prefer to have side-to-side fields. I mean, you'd prefer to have the ability to have side-to-side fields. And again, these are not side-to-side, as you can see. They're the bottom field, this one, what I'm calling the bottom field, that is next to the indoor practice facility, but even that is it's not parallel, it's perpendicular. So we're using a lot of big words here to say Georgia's going to lay this out in a way that they're going to have the capability of spreading out and side to sides. That's my recollection, at least. I might be wrong about that. I don't think so. But that will help them become even more like the NFL. I covered the Falcons very briefly in the 2000s. And, in the NFL, everything's just – it's cookie. There's a lot of cookie cutter. But they have the fields all the way, and then you just kind of go into your facility. And, if you were to go to Flowery Branch, or if you ever watch from up there, you see what I'm talking about. They have the fields right next to each other. That means, like, the number ones, if you wanted to switch out ones versus ones, to twos versus ones, you could guys just walk, 50 yards, not even 50 yards. In this scenario, it's harder to do that. So all this stuff all adds up. So why is Georgia, quote, like an NFL team? Georgia's an NFL team right now. It's all this stuff. I mean, it's the recruiting for sure. That matters a lot. And, to act like, on the first day of the NFL, you see Lab McConkey doing really well. I think he had a few catches and a touchdown. I watched some of the Falcons, which George Pickens is out there. You got Darnell out there. You got Broderick Jones. You just look at anybody on the Eagles, Matthew Stafford, who is not of Kirby's time, but DeAndre Swift. There's just guys everywhere. Charlie Warner. It's not surprising that these guys are having success the way they are, because the practices at Georgia, they're not fun. They're not meant to be fun. None of that stuff. Make sure you're signing up for our newsletter, by the way. The link to that is right down below. You're going to miss out on a lot of content that we can't talk about on here. We just don't have time. The newsletter is down below. Thanks for everybody watching us. We can't do these videos without y'all. Just being straight. We have great partners in all of this, Red Zone and so forth. But, we can't do it without people who, y'all are the reason that we have the capability of doing this. And we're going to be up at Lexington this weekend watching Georgia play. That's going to be a hard game for Kentucky. And I read some stuff that Mark Stoops said over the weekend about their loss to Kentucky. I expect Kentucky to be kind of fired up. But if one thing goes wrong, you could see them really wilt. I mean, I don't know that they will, but they are a really tough team. But, man, they got drilled last year by Georgia. And they really got physically beaten up by South Carolina this past week. And that's not a good look for Kentucky with Georgia coming into town. I mean, Brock Vandergriff would have to play phenomenally. And that's asking a lot for a guy going start number 3 against his old team. And by the way, if his old team were, Mississippi State, it'd be one thing. But the fact that it's Georgia and that he went to Georgia is irrelevant. The fact that they're playing Georgia, man, that's hard. That's hard. And Brock would know. And Pop would know. And these guys have lived those practices. Like, what was so amazing about Brock Vandagriff the first time he played at G-Day in 21, the spring of 21, was that he outran the defense. Like, that's what you got with him. He is Bo Nix, like, times 2, I feel like. Maybe that's a stretch, but like he is that athletic. He is super gifted in terms of running the ball. The challenge for Bo Nix and Brock and everybody, it's not CJ Stroud, I guess. You have to play quarterback against these guys. It's really hard to be successful playing quarterback against these guys if you don't play quarterback well. And Georgia's played some really good quarterbacks through the years. Guys who, Anthony Richardson, top 5 pick. CJ Stroud, top 5 pick. Bryce Young, top 5 pick. You can keep it rolling. Not a lot of those guys got W's against Georgia. Some did, but not a lot. Jaden Daniels. These guys are starting in the NFL, and they got a lot of L's against Georgia. They got more losses than wins. I mean, the only guy that was really successful against Georgia, Joe Burrow, like consistently. So that's going to be challenging for Brock. It will be very challenging for Brock. Now, why will it be challenging? It's because these practices, man. I mean, like, there's a lot going on during these practices that is, it's hard. I mean, they're not, it is harder. These practices are harder than the games. And why do I say that? Not because of talking to somebody, when they're in front of a microphone, but just like talking to guys, assistants, people around, former players. They've seen it or they've lived it, and they can tell you right now it's legitimate. People in the NFL, I'm not nearly as connected there at all, but whenever you talk to a scout or, they're gracious enough to say anything, they say, yeah, man, it's legit. It's a different kind of level of practice, and that's what you need to know. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the newsletter.